Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another edition of Soccer as We Like It. As you know, breaking news, the world is mourning the death of who we know as the king of the beautiful game, otherwise known as Pele, died today at the age of 82. May his soul rest in peace, and we wish and send our condolences to his family. I mean, when you talk about the best of the best, before Ronaldo, before Messi, before Romario, before Ronaldo, Brazilian Ronaldo, before Zico, before all that, there was a Pele. Before Eusebio, before Bobby Charlton. In that era, he played in the 50s and 60s and 70s and retired in 1977 from football altogether. But this guy was an absolute genius. I'm going to go over a few of his stats and we'll just break it from there. But the world mourns the guy who is known as simply the best. When you talk about Pele, you think about the beautiful game. When you think about Pele, when you hear his name, it's associated with absolute excellence. Everything any current footballer has done, what Ronaldo, what Messi done, if it's scissors kicks, step overs, dribbles, he had done it all. Before these guys, there was a Pele, there was a God. This is the guy, the only person, the only footballer to win three World Cups: 1958, 1962, and 1970. No footballer has achieved that in common football history up to today. So that holds that record. And he, even though Brazil has produced so many great strikers, Romario, Ronaldo, Neymar, none of them have broken Pele's record of 77 goals in 92 games. So he is an absolute legend. He did suffer from colon cancer. Um, it is a deadly disease, which he wasn't able to beat it. But even though his daughter Keely was constantly updating the world of what her father was going through in reference to his sickness and updates, and but it is what it is. But we cannot but admire how great this guy was. He's literally met every president. He's such a global star. His star shines so much. He's a global ambassador, not to Brazil, but to the world of football on his own. He's literally met nearly every living past and present president around back in the day. From the British prime ministers to the American presidents, he met Reagan, he met Reagan, he met Bush, he met Obama, he met Biden. So he has been around so many times and he draws beauty. He draws people towards him. He exuberates and gravitates love of the beautiful game. See what I mean? This guy was an absolute genius. So I'm just going to quickly pull up some stats and we're just going to quickly work it from there. But this guy, when I was a kid, I was too young to know who, but my dad growing up back in the 70s and 80s, the 70s, 80s, it was about Pele, Pele, Pele. That's the name you played. Every kid on the playground wanted to be Pele. There was no one else. Everyone wanted to be Pele. And he played for Brazil. So it was like, wow, these guys were mystical. There was this myth about them. They had the Samba beat. When they beat the Samba, they start playing in the golden, yellow, and blue. It was something else. It was mystical. But Pele was the name we all heard. Pele Brazil, Pele Brazil. It's funny how when I think back now as a kid playing football, you hear about how you wanted to be this Pele guy. Till when we started watching TV and telly, and I mean, there was no YouTube or internet you could go watch it, but nowadays it's available. My son knows who Pele is, but then we just saw anytime there's a World Cup. But the World Cup, I was too young to watch Pele's World Cup in 1970, in 1962, I wasn't even born in those years. So it was hard to see it. But we saw them in football magazines. As I grew up in the 80s, you start reading about how great this guy was, even though he had retired at that time. While you're watching our video, don't forget to smash a like and don't forget to subscribe. We are talking about the greatest guy to grace the field of football in terms of the beautiful game. Uh, Let me quickly pull these stats up for you quickly. Hold on, hold on. So yeah, I mean, at 82, I mean, He was born in 1940, Brazil. His first club was Santos. I think that was the only club he really played for in Brazil. Then he was part of the driving force to introduce football, also known as soccer in the United States, by bringing that sport to life. He was one of the first people to come into America and introduce that sport. He played for a club called Cosmos in New York, and when he opened the doors, other great players came through. George Best came through. Franz Beckenbauer came through. Eusebio. These are all the greats from the 60s and 70s. These were football giants. These were football icons. It's now whereby it's only just two players who are dominating, Ronaldo and Messi. Then you had Pele, you had Eusebio, you had Bobby Charlton, you had Georgie Best. You had so many great players. You know what I mean? And even that Brazilian team had players like Garrincha, Vava, Didi, Jairzinho, Revellino. There were so many. That Brazil team of 1970 were on another level, led by Carlos Alberto, the manager, the captain. If you watch the game against Italy in 1970 when they beat Italy 4-1, and if you saw, look, if you the way they caressed the ball with so much ease and love and beauty, of the way they kept the ball, as in they didn't want to harm the ball. You're not going to touch this ball. We're going to protect this ball. You come and get this ball, but we're going to make sure this ball is not harmed. And they just put the ball in the net with grace, elegance, precision, and absolute brilliance. I mean, I've seen that game, 1970 Brazil final, 1970, and played in Mexico. A crowd of 112,000 witnessed that game at Aztec Stadium. It still comes down as one of the greatest games ever played. Come on, where are we? There we go. Right. So he was an absolute genius. I mean, Pele, his real name, people really don't know. His real name is Edson Arantes de Nascimento. So his real name is Edson Arantes de Nascimento. But as you know, if you follow football, Brazilian names are so long that they are literally unpronounceable. A commentator can say Edson Arantes, no. So they get Pele, born in October 23rd, 1940 in Brazil. Brazil football player. The time was probably the most famous football player in the world, one of the best paid athletes in the world. You got to understand, this guy was one of the youngest players to go in the World Cup and score and win a World Cup in 1958 at the age of 17. I think his record was broken by Norman Whiteside from Northern Ireland, but to win the World Cup at 17, unachievable. No one has done that. In 1958, he won that World Cup. In 1962, he went back, retained it with Brazil, even though he was injured after the third game in that tournament. Then in 1966, they were literally bundled out of the World Cup, which was held in England. The ferocious tackles on Brazilian players kicked Brazil out. Then they came back in 70 with a new style of play, new Samba football, and stroked teams out, just passing precision football, and destroyed teams like they were going out of fashion. Pele, the first player to win 3 World Cups, 1958, 1962, 1970. No one's achieved that in today's football. I mean, it can be achieved. I mean, Mbappe had won this last World Cup a couple of weeks ago. That would have made him 2 World Cup winning at 23. So he still has 2 more World Cups to go. And if he wins 1 more, he would have equaled Pele's record. But you never know what football is. Football is a funny old game. So when he played for Cosmos. So this is where we have a bit of discrepancy. Back in the day, they didn't keep records as they are now. And some games were described as exhibition games. But his total goals in his career was 1,281 goals in 1,365 matches in all his career. But some of those games were said to be exhibition games. So I don't know. He played for Cosmos for literally all his life, from when he was 17 to he started playing for Santos at age 15. Went to the Brazilian national team at 17 and won the World Cup. That's phenomenal. I mean, absolutely phenomenal. So at 15, he's playing for Santos. one of the biggest teams in Brazil then, and won everything. They were winning titles, like 10 titles in a row. They were like the dominant Brazilian team. He played for them up to 1974. Then he decided, because after winning the World Cup in 58 and 62, and retired in 70, scoring 77 goals for Brazil and in 92 games for Brazil. 92 caps, 77 goals. Neymar hasn't gotten to that. Ronaldo, Brazilian Ronaldo never got that. Romario never got up to that. So he's still the record holder for Brazil, and he retired in 1970. That's a long time ago. That is 52 years ago. He retired from football, from Brazil national team, and no one has broken that record. It shows how immense the magnitude and majestic player this guy was. He was, like I said, every trick a player has now, he has done it. Nothing new that we are seeing now, he has done it. Bicycle kick, free kicks, banana kick, overhead kicks. And this guy, if you guys didn't know, this guy was only 5'8". He wasn't a tall guy. He wasn't a 6-foot player. He was 5'8". But his ability to leap in the air and hang and score with head was phenomenal. So when he retired from football in 1970 for Brazil, winning the World Cup the third time, unachievable in today's football, in today's date. Currently, no one's won 3 World Cups. He now decided to go for another change. That's when he was attracted and drawn to New York, United States, to come and implement and bring football, soccer to United States. He played for a club called New York Cosmos, where he was there for 3 years, 3 seasons, 1975, 76, and then 7. He played a total of 107 games, scoring 66 goals. Mind you, they played on AstroTurf, artificial pitch. It wasn't it wasn't grass. It was synthetic. It was synthetic. It was really, you played without studs or cleats on your boots. It was like flats, right? So he was there for 3 seasons, established the game, made the game more popular, and since then, USA hasn't looked back. I know they still don't do the relegation thing yet, but the mark he left, and his final game it was on October 1st, 1977, between Santos and Cosmos. So he played for each side and scored the winning goal for Santos with a beautiful free kick. And that was the last goal he ever scored in football. And he brought his career to a total end. I mean, that guy was a genius. All I can say, my dad always told me about it. This guy was the best of the best. In that era, to this era, nobody has surpassed what he's done. And those days, I'll tell you guys now, they never had Ballon d'Ors. If there were Ballon d'Ors then, he would have got about 15 or 20 Ballon d'Ors because he was that great. He was that immense. At 17, mate, this guy was on another level, mate. Give credit where credit is due. This guy was absolutely fantastic. Pele, thank you for everything you've done. You will be missed, but you won't be forgotten. On that note, all I could simply say, this guy was absolutely the greatest of all time. No player will ever achieve his status. It's so much as the grace, what he exuberates, what he brought to the game as a global ambassador to the sport. He met leaders and people wanted to just shake his hand. You know, people just wanted to shake his hand. And rulers, kings and princesses and queens and presidents around the world, anytime Pele came to their country, they wanted to meet him. This guy literally stopped some countries that were fighting a civil war. You see what I mean? He was that beautiful of a person. He was such a great guy. If you notice, he always had a smile of happiness and peace of the beautiful game that we all love and we call football. Pele, thank you, thank you, thank you for everything you brought to the game. For every kid my age, my generation, looked up to, wanted to be you. You inspired a lot of people to be football players because of the way you caressed the ball. You knew every trick, every skill, every tackle, every dribble, every speed. He had pace, he had power, he had heading ability. He could do everything. Left foot, right foot, heading. The complete footballer. Pele, rest in peace. Our condolences are with you and your family. We thank you. You will be missed, but never forgotten. This World Cup will always remember a guy called Pele, the youngest player to win it at 1958 at age 17. Your history will always remain. If you guys have not read this book, one of the best books to read. This guy at a young age nearly died, but I don't want to give away too much. But this guy, that picture, him and Giorgino, 1970, after scoring the goal against Italy in 1970, that picture is synonymous, is symbolic to football of the beautiful game. Pele, an absolute pleasure reading this guy's book. His story, it's fantastic, beautiful pictures of, his life. It's do you have those iconic pictures? That picture of him and Bobby Moore shaking hands after Brazil beat England in the quarterfinals 1-0, and that fantastic save by Gordon Banks when Pele thought the ball was in. Pele literally headed and was turning around to celebrate, and Gordon Banks from nowhere scooped that ball off the line. If you haven't seen that save, one of the greatest saves ever in a World Cup. Gordon Banks, England versus Brazil, 1970. Fantastic game. Brazil won 1-0, but that was a game. Absolutely brilliant. So that iconic picture of Bobby Moore, England picture, he also passed away in the 90s, and Pele shaking hands and their shirts off is an iconic picture. Pele and Giorgino when he scored that goal against Italy, that's another iconic picture. And Pele in 1970 being carried up are iconic pictures that you always remember. Pele, the guy, the king of the kings, the king of football, the king of the beautiful game. That guy is no more, but his legacy will never be equaled. I'll see you guys on the next one. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It's an absolute pleasure. Pele, rest in peace. Till we see you on the other side.